Hello, Patrick. Good morning.
Hi, how's it going?
Good, thanks. Thanks for accepting to be interviewed. Okay, there are some few questions, okay?
Sure.
So, okay, the first one. Should governments prioritize spending on exploration of space?
Government should prioritize spending on space in the same way that they should prioritize spending on science, because learning about space is part of science and therefore should be a priority. Unfortunately, we have an organization in the US called NASA, and we don't know how our taxpayer dollars are being spent. They say that they're researching space. Supposedly, they went to the moon in the 60s, but we don't know what they're doing. And there are many privatization schemes underway. Elon Musk's SpaceX being perhaps the most notable example. He plans to send a man to Mars in 2024. And with private exploration of space, you avoid a lot of the mismanagement of public funds.
Interesting. I've heard about it. Okay, so is space an important frontier for human exploration?
Yes, it is. It's extremely important. We are space creatures and we inhabit a planet. So the more we can learn about other planets, the more we can learn about our own planet. Unfortunately, the militarization of space is something that military planners talk about. They call space the next frontier in warfare, and there's all sorts of proposals afoot. One of them is what the military planners are calling rods from God, which are metal telephone poles that are going to be mounted on satellites. They can come crashing down to create meteor-like events anywhere on the Earth to punish small countries. There's these killer satellites that military planners are talking about launching. So yes, space is important and research in space is important, but the militarization of space is something that I think we should all be skeptical about, and we need to inform ourselves so that this stuff doesn't happen without our being aware of it.
Okay. Does space exploration benefit science, human understanding?
Yeah, because we are, like I said earlier, we are space creatures, and the more that we can learn about space, it can tell us about Earth, because Earth is part of space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So should space exploration be publicly funded?
I think that it should be publicly funded, just like science should be publicly funded. But the problem is the mismanagement. We spend all these tax dollars that go to NASA, but we don't know how it's being used. And there's talk about a secret space program that avoids any kind of public oversight. So these are the issues that we're grappling with.
Okay, cool. Here's an interesting question. Does the human race need to be able to move to another planet?
Well, as Earth becomes more and more contaminated, that just might be an option.
That might be an option in the future.
Yeah, and think about it. If there was going to be a colony on Mars, say, which has the most similar climate to ours, if you're 78 or 88 years old, you might volunteer to go to Mars because okay, you're not going to have that much more time to live, but you can contribute something. And so that, who knows, in the future, perhaps there might be colonies on Mars.
Okay, so as a consequence, are missions to Mars important, worth funding?
Well, Elon Musk thinks so, and he's got a website for his company SpaceX, and he plans to send the first human to Mars in the next few years. So we'll see what happens with that.
Okay, so should people be flown to space instead of robots?
Well, I think the robots should go there first, and they can take pictures and find out what's there. But if somebody wants to go to space, supposedly they sent a man to the moon in the 60s. Whether or not that really happened or not is a different question. But why haven't we ever been back? Our technology is so much better than it was in the 60s, but there's not even been an attempt to send somebody back to the moon. So I think it's time that we send humans to other planets. We've done all this other stuff, so why shouldn't we be able to do that?
Interesting. Okay, so is sending humans to space good for international relations?
I think so, because countries can cooperate. John Kennedy, he wanted to bring about cooperation with the Russians in space, and the speculation that might have been what got him killed, but I think that it's important to work together and with other countries, and that can be good for international relations. But the militarization of space is something that is definitely not good for international relations, because who controls space controls the world. And now U.S. military planners are talking about putting a space fence around the Earth, locking the Earth in place. And all these proposals are actually very dangerous. And they get into the subject of geoengineering and terraforming the Earth. So I think we have to be careful. And that's another reason why we need public oversight. A lot of the money that goes for the exploration of space, like to NASA, is spent on the militarization of space. And so I think we need to be careful and do things that are pro-science, but also pro-peace.
Okay, so should opponents of space exploration still be required to contribute?
Well, a lot of times people are called opponents of space exploration because they don't want the money to be mismanaged, or maybe they're pro privatization schemes. The thing about private companies taking over space research is that they're not going to mismanage the funds. So I wouldn't mind paying for science, but I want to know how my taxpayer dollars are being spent. I want there to be more public oversight of organizations like NASA. And NASA NASA, say it stands for Never a Straight Answer, and they've actually been proven liars. So I think there needs to be more public involvement and less secrecy.
Okay, so the last question. Tell some of the disadvantages you perceive from space exploration.
Well, the disadvantages could be what we've already talked about. As space exploration increases, there's also the parallel militarization of space. And just from the proposals that are already in place, mounting bombs on satellites and killer satellites that can shoot down other satellites, this is the brave new world that we're living in. So I think we should be cautious. And these sorts of military proposals can only really gain prominence because nobody knows that they're going on. I think if these rods from God and these killer satellites were on the front pages of the newspapers, there would be an outcry.
Okay, so we've had Patrick Phillips with us. Thanks, Philip. Thanks.
Yeah, my pleasure. Always a pleasure.